complex, much too complex, too complex, much too complex, too complex, too complex, too complex.
Good evening. My name is James K. Holder II. Some of you may know me as Sir James II, and I'd like to welcome you back to Not on My Watch. As always, I'd like to ask you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I want you to retweet this and repeat this. If you're watching, today is April 5th, 2018, and we are still in reflection on the 50th anniversary of the passing of the Honorable Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Rest in peace, MLK. I want to say rest in peace, Shahid Vassell, and also rest in peace to Timothy Cunningham. One of the most profound statements or sentiments from Dr. Martin Luther King that I found shocking but also relevant was his letter from Birmingham jail. On April 16th, 1963, approximately 5 years before his death, Dr. Martin Luther King wrote these words, and this is just a very brief excerpt. It says, "First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed in the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative space, which is the absence of tension, to a positive space, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically, that's a very key term, feels he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season." Now, the climate around this letter is quite different than what we're experiencing now, but it shouldn't go unnoticed that we really, when it comes back to discussions around Dr. Martin Luther King, again, Dr. King has been idolized and really formed into this model of this caricature that is happy-go-lucky and friendly, and I have a dream, and he's a dreamer, and all this other stuff. And it really is an erasure of what the true plight of Dr. Martin Luther King's experiences are and how they formed his powerful message. Against hate, against darkness, against lies, against evil. On April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And it was probably the most profoundly devastating moment in American history, especially within the Black community. We can talk about how it felt to witness Donald Trump being elected almost 50 years later. But I wasn't alive in 1968, but I know that the wounds still exist. The fear, the disappointment, the rage, the anger still exists. That doesn't go away. It was a galvanizing moment of pain and fear that this man who led his entire life in a non-violent way and denounced violence in all of its forms would meet his demise at the hands of a white supremacist who had access to a gun and bullets and decided to murder him in a time in our country where we were starting to see some progress. My personal journey and understanding of Dr. Martin Luther King's teaching is sort of enhanced by the fact that, again, in being a galvanizing moment in Black history, the school that I attended in college, the Georgia Institute of Technology, founded its Black student organization. At the time, it was called the Georgia Tech Afro-American Association, GTAAA, which ultimately formed into the Georgia Tech African American Student Union, that really led the charge of activism on campus to push issues. I mean, I think that was a wit's end moment for Black students, and certainly on campuses, you saw a level of activism and consciousness in the political realm that you maybe hadn't seen before. It's interesting to me that in 2016, we saw the concept that youth engagement in political topics was something new or something exceptional or something groundbreaking. And again, it really wasn't. Black college students, even though in universities like Georgia Tech, where, by the time King gave this speech, a black student had never graduated from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Black students weren't even allowed to enroll at Georgia Tech, which is in the city that Dr. Martin Luther King was born and buried. Weren't even allowed to attend there until 1961. Dr. Martin Luther King went to Washington High School, where I go vote in every election. That's the designated voting location. It's where my niece attends school. I'm connected to this community in a way that is really disturbing when you consider the fact that Dr. Martin Luther King, he attended Morehouse College. He was young. He was an exceptional student, obviously. I mean, he was a very young student. So this, again, what we constantly see is an erasure of Black accomplishment. Whether it's the freedom riders, whether it's the people the sit-inners of the civil rights movement that were young people, we continually keep seeing that, millennials, and even now when it came to the March for Our Lives, there was this celebration and sort of elitism placed around the white students. Within the last few weeks, you even saw that, you look at someone like David Hogg, who is a white student from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who has about 1 million Twitter followers. I think he's at like 700,000 Twitter followers now. But then the Black students are constantly being left out of the conversation about gun violence in their school. And no, it's not all black and white, but there's black and there's white to it. At the beginning of this video, I said rest in peace to Saheed Vassell. Now, forgive me if I'm not pronouncing his name correctly, but he is one of the latest victims of police brutality at the hands of gun violence in this country. And this happened in Brooklyn, New York. This is not some rural town. This is not some, school somewhere. This is not some movie theater. This is just people living in their communities where they're born and being terrorized by gun violence, whether it's at the hands of the police or someone who's not a member of law enforcement. And so we really, really have to take a step back and assess where we're going wrong with these things. And I think I want to call this video the Caucasity of Hope, and the reason why unescorted white allies aren't allowed at the cookout. When I was a student at Georgia Tech, not only was I the president of the African American Student Union, I was also the president of the Students for Obama chapter at Georgia Tech. We hosted Barack Obama in the largest rally the South had seen at that time, with 18,000 participants at Yellow Jacket Park in Atlanta. My student organization, the African American Student Union, arranged that meeting. Now, of course, the Obama people did it with, facilities, but our name was credited with reserving the space for that day and having that event. You're welcome. Now, one of the big things that was the takeaway from that event, and that happened, it was like April 12th or April 13th, 2007. And the slogan kept being, how far is South Carolina? Not far. So the lady would call out, how far is South Carolina? And then everybody in the crowd would say, not far. As a organizer and the president of Students for Barack Obama at Georgia Tech, I arranged carpools along with my friends to go to South Carolina and canvass for Barack Obama ahead of the primary in South Carolina. Barack Obama took that very seriously. And so we were engaged there. And around the time of this event at Yellow Jacket Park, which was April the preceding year, and then going into like building up canvassing for the primary in South Carolina, it was really interesting to talk to older black people, because older black people were more supportive of Hillary Clinton at the time, because a lot of them were reluctant to put weight behind Barack Obama and in a protective stance. They really just felt that if Barack Obama was elected president or even got close, that he would instantly be assassinated, that he would be murdered, that he would be taken away. And it was something that we couldn't really understand as canvassers, like my peers, in doing this, because we didn't live through the trauma of witnessing Dr. King being assassinated 40 years prior. And so, reflecting on that now, I look back at that time and think, wow, that generation, the generation that lived and walked the earth with Dr. King, saw so many parallels with Barack Obama that they didn't even want him elected, because they felt like he would meet the same end that Martin Luther King did. And so it's fascinating to me that despite all of the other things that happen, you really end up with a situation where, again, we're seeing a co-opting of an entire movement, an entire generation of pain that occurred, that existed, that people lived through, that people are still alive today that lived through, that is being erased because of this white savior complex that we see in many of the forces in media, in government, in politics, at every level, at every age, in every gender, in every orientation. There's a ubiquity of whiteness, absolutism, exclusivity, and just entitlement that allows these things to continue to happen and our pain to be overshadowed, erased, and replaced with white opinions, white perspectives, and points of view. I want to call an end to that now, because that was a serious wound and it was a problem. Now, there was a lot of healing within the black community with Obama. Obama was somewhat infallible when it came to just the world of scandals. He wasn't sleeping around on his wife. He had good grades. He wasn't an imbecile. He didn't lie about everything under the sun. He really was a quality stand-up person. He's human. But I refuse to engage in Barack Obama wasn't perfect. Barack Obama didn't do this. Barack Obama wasn't great, wasn't that. The level of criticism levied against Barack Obama from white allies has been so egregiously and exorbitantly exploited to, again, erase accomplishments of black people, erase the pain and true emotion associated with the success of Barack Obama. Barack Obama, despite any negative thing you can say about him or his presidency, is a legend. He's an icon. He is a hero. He's a heroic figure in the black community. He is exceptional, and in many ways, he's someone that is still very much celebrated in the black community. It pains me to see people almost reflexively attack him because he wasn't perfect. Because the people who are claiming that he's so flawed are inherently flawed themselves and inadequate. They can't even achieve what he was able to achieve. So I want to just kind of go directly to the meat of this, because time is up. On a day when America should have been understanding that 50 years of progress is in jeopardy because of a decision that was made 2 years prior, on a year that many living black people are nursing the wounds of the trauma they experienced on April 4th, 1968. You had some people who took the high road and spent the day talking about Dr. Martin Luther King. And then you had Bernie motherfucking Sanders, who took his late to the party, but can't be late because you wasn't invited to the motherfucking party in the first place, ass to Mississippi, of all places, to talk shit about Barack Obama on the 50th anniversary of the death of Martin Luther King, who many of whom would say is one, at least, living manifestation of the dream that Dr. Martin Luther King died with. Surely the election of Barack Obama was not the creation of the promised land that Martin Luther King envisioned. But it can't be argued that much progress was made in terms of racial lines, in terms of taking down barriers for women in politics, women in government, women in leadership, marriage equality in the United States. Equality was placed on the forefront with Barack Obama, and no one else who has ever held that position or aspired to it has done as much to push that message, ever, including Bernie Sanders. So I just want to talk for a moment about the problem when you let these motherfuckers in the cookout and then let them off the leash. Because Bernie Sanders is a problem, and he's not going away. But I'm here to ring the bell and tell that motherfucker that time is up. So let's talk about Bernie Sanders and what he said for just a moment. Now, this is reported by Ruby Kramer, because Bernie Sanders did not tweet his comments this time. I didn't see this speech covered on news. And what's ironic also, I want to talk about this. I want to do a little bit of setup for this shit. Because if you look at Bernie Sanders' Twitter feed right now, it is nothing but a bunch of retweets by black Twitter users, including Al Sharpton, some of his Bernie freaks, that always follow everything that he does and really troll the black community with this expectation that we're supposed to fall in line with what these bozos say just because they support somebody else. Now, the problem I have with Bernie Sanders is that he went to Jackson, Mississippi, but only after he bombed photo ops with Al Sharpton, sticking his bald head in between Al Sharpton and one of the King children. I guess it was Martin III or maybe Dexter. I couldn't tell which one it was. In Memphis. He speaks at Memphis with civil rights leaders, including Al Sharpton. And, he's on the leash there, right? Then he traipses his ass to Mississippi, and now I'm still wondering why he was in Mississippi, because Dr. Martin Luther King was born in Atlanta, buried in Atlanta. He was jailed in Alabama and built his career basically in Alabama, and then he was assassinated in Tennessee. So on a memorializing day, and he's immortalized on the mall in Washington, D.C. So why was Bernie Sanders in Mississippi? Why was he in the South? Why was he in a state where he lost the primary bid in Mississippi by like 75 points? Why? He wanted to distance himself, and he saved the worst for last by going there to Jackson, Mississippi, and saying this: the business model, if you like, of the Democratic Party for the last 15 years or so has been a failure. People sometimes don't see that because there was a charismatic individual named Barack Obama. He was obviously an extraordinary candidate, brilliant guy, but beyond that, reality, shrugging, Bernie Sanders says Democrats have lost a record number of legislative seats. Now, here's the problem, because Bernie Sanders' assessment of Barack Obama as nothing more than a charismatic charlatan with 15 years of failure doesn't overcome the fact that Bernie Sanders himself is a 15-minute flop, a 15-minute fraud. Bernie Sanders has had 15 minutes of fame, and that's 15 minutes too long. He has overstayed his welcome into a party that he never joined. He usurped all of the franchise of black people who chose someone more prepared for the job than he was. And when that happened, he united with, maybe willingly, maybe unwittingly, with Russian forces and foreign bot agents and all these other nefarious methodologies and tools to convince and mystify and create this Svengali effect to get people to believe that he's actually the most popular living politician. But last I checked, we were just mourning the loss of Dr. King, not Barack Obama, who's the most popular living politician. Hillary Clinton is also more popular than Bernie Sanders if we're talking about votes. I don't understand how someone who's more popular can get 4 million fewer votes than the person they competed against. But that's the Bernie math that exists. That's the Bernie math that tells you that Barack Obama was the leader of the Democratic Party for 15 years. He wasn't. Before Barack Obama had 2 years as President of the United States, after having won both of his elections and being outed by his term limp max, Barack Obama was preceded for 8 years by another mediocre, unintelligent, ignoramus, white male president named George Walker Bush, who, much like our current fraud president, couldn't even secure a plurality of votes in order to assume the office of the presidency. In the last 20 years, Barack Obama is the only person to serve as president who was chosen by the American population. He didn't get there by fooling white people with his charisma and shucking and jiving and tap dancing. He didn't get there because of the shine on his shoes or because he actually took the time to brush his hair, put lotion on his face before he gave a speech, iron his clothes. He didn't get there because his wife was a brilliant leader on her own who hadn't defrauded and bankrupted a college to the tune of $500,000 for personal gain. Barack Obama promised and delivered in many respects on an opportunity for our country to see ourselves better, to see something within ourselves that was greater than what existed or had ever preceded it. And Barack Obama delivered on that. He created a community of consciousness within the American sphere, a level, a space for us to interact and be pleasant with one another. He brought compassion and dignity to all walks of life in this country in a way that no one who had ever been president before did. If nothing else, that's Barack Obama's legacy. Calling out the fact that 8 years before Barack Obama was president, that Democrats were losing seats, calling out that even the 8 years during Barack Obama's presidency that Democrats were losing seats, seems to me to be the discussion of someone who either has amnesia or a problem with black people. And the reason I say that is because if we look at records of losses, there must be something to document. The cascading flow of sheer losses and devastation that has been the trail left, the footmark print path of Bernie Sanders' legislative endorsements since the 2016 election. Everyone that Bernie Sanders has touched has failed. It happened here in Atlanta with Vincent Fort. It happened with Tim Canova in Florida. It's happened all over the country. And we cannot continue to allow a charlatan and a fool and a fraud and a liar and a racist to continually paint our heroes, like Barack Obama, as failures, as 15-year failures. Bernie Sanders is a flop. Bernie Sanders is an asshole. Bernie Sanders is a con artist. Bernie Sanders is a liar. Bernie Sanders is an unaccomplished, unintelligent, disheveled, foolish, ignorant blowhard. The problem with Bernie Sanders is that he has no ability to control himself. He is an egomaniac. He must be in front of the camera. He refuses to do the work of real movements. He refuses to build a community. He refuses to do the research and support positive legislation that people actually want, including resisting gun violence, allowing the passing of the Brady Bill, things that would allow people, victims of gun violence and mass shootings, to hold gun manufacturers and mom and pop gun store sellers, as he calls them, accountable for the deaths of innocent people in schools and in churches. Bernard Sanders is the type of motherfucker who would take the 50th anniversary of the death of a martyr who was the leader of the nonviolent resistance, who was slain by the hands of white-hot rage and hotter bullets that were given because of the culture of white supremacy and access to guns in the Second Amendment for white males only. That is why Dr. King is dead, because of America's culture of guns. This is a culture that Bernie Sanders has built a career on. This is a culture that Bernie Sanders has benefited from financially. This is a culture that told Bernie Sanders, the three-time failed candidate from Vermont, who couldn't get into the Congress until he got in bed with the NRA in exchange for votes against mandatory background checks and waiting periods on purchasing guns. It infuriates me that people provide cover for the sheer hypocrisy of what Bernie Sanders brings to every conversation when he opens his mouth. Whether invited or not, Bernie Sanders will find his way to a microphone and a camera. He did it at the March for Our Lives. Not even 2 years after claiming that victims of mass shootings don't have the right to sue gun manufacturers. This is his position during the entire 2016 election. Didn't matter about Charlotte, didn't matter about all the other mass shootings that have continued to plague our country. Bernie Sanders had a finite and defined position on this issue that is opposite exactly what the March for Our Lives stands for. Yet he found his way to a mic, co-opting a movement of young people with his old ass. And I'm not here to age shame anybody, but when someone who was born in 1941 claims to have all the answers for someone who was born in the 21st century, that's the mark of someone who doesn't have it all working up here. Someone who has the unmitigated gall to attend a memorial service for Dr. Martin Luther King and use it as an opportunity to bash the Democratic Party, use it as an opportunity to claim that Barack Obama is responsible for 15 years of failures within the Democratic Party. Use it as an opportunity to attack the living manifestation of Dr. Martin Luther King. I take severe issue with that. And I'm not going to be quiet about it. Bernie Sanders needs to do some serious self-reflection. He is probably the least self-aware candidate I've ever seen on the stage, given every single opportunity to dodge and duck from responsibility for his actual failures, which I'm not even going to get into now because this is only a 30-minute show, and I'm sure I've already gone over my allotted time for this segment. Bernie Sanders takes every opportunity to co-opt movements, just like he did with the Women's Convention, which he was invited to as a keynote speaker and then canceled on their asses 2 days before the event when they told him he couldn't have the prime speaking role. This is who he is. Dr. Maya Angelou, we celebrated her birthday yesterday. She would have been 90. She said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Bernie Sanders, since the time he reached the national stage, has not stopped attacking Barack Obama. He has not stopped attacking the Democratic Party. These types of attacks from Bernie Sanders are not new. They are not selective to some outrage about a particular moment or climate or stage. And what we're experiencing as Americans, it is non-stop attack. Bernie Sanders focuses so much more time attacking representatives that were elected by black voices, black votes, people who black people chose to support, including Hillary Clinton, including Barack Obama, including John Lewis. He has used every opportunity to belittle, demean, to minimize, in many cases, levy harassment against the supporters of people who simply called out issues with his hypocrisy. When everyone in the world was mourning the half-century loss of one of the greatest influences on American positive culture, Bernie Sanders was talking about himself. It's disappointing. And even for someone who I have such little respect for as Bernie Sanders, I'm still disappointed in his failure to have an ounce of dignity, an ounce of class. Failure to have an ounce of compassion for what the people he claims to be the saviors of, the helpless black people who Barack Obama's charisma fooled into electing him to be the president who killed killed Osama bin Laden, presided over marriage equality, the creation of the Affordable Care Act, and numerous other accomplishments, despite being levied with a legislative body fueled by racism against him, and claims that he was a fraud, that he never went to college, that he wasn't born in this country, that he wasn't American enough. This is what he faced the entire time. Bernie Sanders never faced that. Bernie Sanders is unequivocally the biggest reason why Donald Trump was elected to be the president of the United States. You can agree with me, you cannot agree with me on that sentiment. He did everything in his power to ensure that Barack Obama was not preceded by his ideal predecessor or successor, who would have been Hillary Clinton. He did everything he possibly could. And now, it's almost as if he's working on round two to ensure that the Democratic Party is split and weakened and attacked, even though we know all of the claims and sources that he used to claim that he was defrauded, that he was wronged, came from Russian forces. They came directly or indirectly from Russia, our sworn enemy, against Barack Obama specifically and Hillary Clinton. They were on the side of Bernie Sanders, just like the NRA was on the side of Bernie Sanders to help him. And the NRA was powerful enough to get his punk ass elected in lily white Vermont, but I'm afraid that Russia was not powerful enough to help Bernie Sanders form a competent enough campaign to earn the votes and the respect of the American people in the Democratic primary, to which he's not a part of the party. And I'm here to say, time's up, party's over, pack your shit and leave. You gotta go, Bernie. You can't keep dwelling in the foyer. You can't keep standing at the front door of the party dissuading everybody from coming in because you don't like the food that's being served. You don't like the music that's being played. Because you don't like how things are done, but you're not even here. Get away from the door. Get off the doorstep. Get off the doormat. You are persona non grata, Bernie. And for your henchmen, Killer Mike, I mean, just take a moment and consider that Killer Mike, within the last 2 weeks, was seen prominently featured on NRA TV, promoting promoting pro-gun sentiment, and it was used as propaganda to attack parkland survivors. That's your crew, boo. And in the culture of out-of-pocket, not-a-hand white allies, I just want to have a moment for Michael Rappaport, who needs to delete his account because of his treatment of Kenya Moore on Watch What Happens Live on Easter Sunday. Michael Rappaport has a really disgusting way that he talks to women, and specifically black women. I didn't like his accusations against Kenya. I didn't like that he claimed that Kenya assaulted Kim Fields. I didn't like that he said that Kenya deserved to have her ass beat by Portia. I didn't like those things. When Michael Rappaport was defeated by the calm, cool, and collected Kenya Moore, he then reverted to attacking her on the color of her eyes, the texture of her skin, the amount of makeup she had on, her hair texture, the fact that she wears fake hair. He took every possible dig that you could to the external facade of a black woman in today's society. And when that didn't work, he resorted to posting up a picture of Kenya next to an ape. That's white supremacy. That is racism. And I think what Michael Rappaport needs to do is put down the script from Higher Learning, where he played Remy, who shot Tyra Banks to death bleeding on the track at UCLA, and sit the fuck down and listen. And on that couch where Michael Rappaport is sitting the fuck down and listening, Cynthia Nixon needs to join him. Because when Cynthia Nixon joined Wendy Williams on the couch at the Wendy Williams show this week, she had a lot to say about Black Lives Matter and Black Lives Mattering, and when we say Black Lives Matter, we need to mean it. And she had a lot to say about how black women were the backbone of the Democratic Party, but how black women won't be voting Democratic if the party keeps disrespecting them. And I thought, this is why white allies shouldn't be invited to the cookout unescorted. Sometimes y'all need somebody who's black to tell you when to shut the fuck up. Because, frankly, the out-of-pocketness of Bernie Sanders, the out-of-pocketness of Michael Rappaport, and Cynthia Nixon, you know, kudos. You fucked Blair Underwood on your show, Sex and the City. I don't know how many other black castmates you had in the five seasons y'all were on, or in the movies you had, except Jennifer Hudson playing somebody's assistant in the movie. But, you know, if we're talking about Black Lives Matter from your platform, look at the progress within your industry. No, maybe you're not a producer. No, maybe you weren't a writer on the show. But the reality is, you can't show up now after all the years of activism, specifically against stop and frisk, specifically against black people in New York, and then claim that you're the Black Lives Matter candidate, that you are the advocate for black women. It's total bullshit. And if you want to be a candidate, just be a candidate for your cause, whatever that is. Bernie Sanders, there's no need for you to speak on MLK Day. It's fine. Just speak the next day or the day before. Say what you've got to say. You can give the same speech, but you don't have to step on our platform attacking us and the people that we love to promote your motherfucking bullshit brand. You don't have to do that. You shouldn't do it. That's what makes it wrong. I don't have a problem with your opinion, Michael Rappaport. I don't have a problem with your position, Cynthia Nixon. I don't have a problem with your voice, Bernie Sanders. It irks the fuck out of me. But my issue is how you work to exploit positions and then use those positions to paint yourself as some savior or advocate for the people that you're demeaning and erasing in everything you're saying. And one final bar for Roseanne Barr. You are garbage. You are the same person who loved the Democratic Party. You loved Hillary Clinton in 2008 until she endorsed Barack Obama. That was when you flipped on the party. That was when you flipped on Hillary Clinton. And that was when you waged your war along lockstep with the Tea Party and the GOP and Trumpism. All of the claims, all of these conspiracies that you use this gutter facade as this now you play a broke, white person, working class person on on television, but so does Bernie Sanders. You claim you're broke, but you're worth millions of dollars. Roseanne Barr is worth millions of dollars, and yet you use this position of the downtrodden, white, hurt family person who has been wronged by the years of Obama allowing gay people to get married. You've been so disenfranchised by the fact that trans people can serve in the military. It was so offensive to you that Sonia Sotomayor was appointed a Supreme Court justice. It's not, I would say it's laughable, but it's not funny. And for all the people who watched the Roseanne reboot, you're racist pieces of shit. All of you. And Roseanne falls into that category too. The fact that Roseanne, as of this week, their episode, and I don't watch their bullshit show, there's so many other quality shows to watch on a Tuesday, including the latest released by TBS, The Last OG, featuring Tracy Morgan and Tiffany Haddish. Excellent show. I insist you watch it. Watch it instead of watching Roseanne. She took her platform on ABC to attack Fresh Off the Boat and Blackish. That's a problem. And it can't be tolerated. You want to come to the party, you want to eat the food, you want to drink the liquor, complain about the music, complain about the food, you refuse to leave, you refuse to help clean up. And then you claim you would have thrown a better party. It's absurd. I've been up at night over this because I'm so angry with the level of racism that I've seen that passes for opinions and commentary and politics and television. White people, you gotta take more responsibility in recognizing the hurtful nature of these types of offenses. And then you've got to take a better stand when people cross the line. I'm going to end it there because I absolutely want to thank our friends to the show for donating $1 or more to the PayPal link, www.paypal.me/jkh2. This week, I'm thanking a lot of people. I'm really overwhelmed by the amount of support that you all have shown in the last sort of coming back of The Counter, the series. I really do need a lot of help in putting that show on. So many of you have donated at the $100 level to help fund the actual episodes. Many of you have donated anything that you could, $5, $10. I really, really appreciate it. I posted a great series called the Money Saving Morning Routine series. It's a 10-minute video that's aimed at teaching you how to cook 3 preparations: your coffee or breakfast beverage for the day, your breakfast for the day, and also your lunch for the day, all cooked within 10 minutes with combining techniques and methodology to save that time, and really uses a little bit of innovation and a lot of health tips on how to reduce your processed food intake, how to reduce your oil consumption, how to reduce your sodium and sugar in your diet for your daily meals, and how to avoid spending all of your money on takeout for breakfast and lunch and coffee. It's just a really good series, and I'm really glad that people are enjoying it and watching it. and supporting it. So thank you for supporting. Thank you for watching. I want to thank Brian C., Barry G., Raj B., Elizabeth C. I want to thank Kristen W., Valeria L. I want to thank Richard S., also Annie K., Tanisa W., Susanna W., Angela W., and also Jennifer S., and lastly, Sheila G. I'm so grateful for the donations to the show. I mean, again, even if it's just $1, it just really does help me put together the stuff for the programming, because now that I'm doing more shows, it just requires a lot more support. And so I really am grateful, and all of your support with that. I want to thank you for watching this episode of Not On My Watch. I apologize if it ran over. I'm certain that it did. But this is stuff that needed to be addressed, and it's not going to go away until we all recognize the serious problem of the out-of-pocket white savior. With that, I'm signing off, asking you to relax, relate, and resist. Thank you.
Too complex, much too complex. Too complex, much too complex. Too complex, too complex, too complex.